Shots. The idea makes some grown men I know get queasy and weak in the knees. Most of us avoid them if we can, and no one I know actively seeks them out. I got the regular vaccinations as I was growing up, and other than a booster shot here and there, I didn't really think much about it. But a conversation several years ago changed my mind. Soon after my son started medical school, we had an extensive discussion about vaccinations. He was animatedly discussing the merits of herd immunity. Herd immunity is the idea that an entire community is protected when almost everyone is immunized. If someone in the community contracts polio, something nearly everyone is immunized against, no one will catch it because for all practical purposes, the whole community is immunized. The group as a whole protects babies who are too young to receive vaccinations, the seriously ill who can't be immunized, and the elderly. We no longer had children at home, but we did have a few small grandchildren. It had been many years since my last booster shot, and I had never had a flu shot, but this conversation with my son changed how I looked at my own immunization record. The very last thing I wanted to do was to put the health of my grandchildren in jeopardy because I didn't want to get a shot or I was uninformed about vaccinations. In the last 15 years, there's been a lot of public conversation about vaccinations, and it all started in 1980 when the highly regarded English medical journal, The Lancet, published a study by Dr. Andrew Wakefield. In the paper, Dr. Wakefield reported finding a link between the MMR vaccine, that's the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, and autism and colitis, which is a bowel disease. It gained a wide audience following the publication because the incidence of autism has risen steadily since the 1960s. There are no easy answers to explain why so many children are diagnosed with autism now. Many people jumped on the bandwagon of finding a reason or a cause for autism. Though the paper stoked fears across the world, this study appears to be a correlational link only, not causal, meaning that Dr. Wakefield was attempting to show that children who had had the MMR vaccine also had a high incidence of autism and colitis. Even before the study was published, though, Dr. Wakefield made statements calling for a suspension of the MMR vaccine. Thus began the birth of the anti-vaccine crusades across the world. The problem is that the paper Dr. Wakefield wrote was later retracted by The Lancet for ethical misconduct on the part of Dr. Wakefield. A Canadian journalist subsequently reported that Dr. Wakefield had prearranged with a pharmaceutical company to produce a study that would show current vaccine delivery systems as defective. The pharmaceutical company would then release a new formulation that would find huge financial success. The results of this travesty have been devastating. Many worried parents followed the counsel of celebrities who believed Dr. Wakefield's study was still genuine and their advice to forego vaccinations altogether. What has happened has been a resurgence of what was once considered eradicated childhood diseases. I want to tell a story of a young family told in the words of the father. In the early 1990s, we were living in Berlin, Germany. We were young and full of plans for the future. My wife was working as a nurse, and I had just started my professional career as an engineer. We became a little family when our oldest son was born in 1992. We built our nest, had great friends and neighbors, and simply enjoyed life as a young family. As most parents probably are, we were very grateful and thankful. 2 years later, during 1994, our second child, Max, saw the light of day and made our family happiness complete. When he got sick in the winter of 1994, we were a bit worried because of his young age. After all, he was only 6 months old when measles hit him badly. It had been way too early for vaccination, but not too early for infection. He spent several days with a high fever while his pediatrician feared that he would develop some sort of complications. And he did. His lungs got affected, he developed a dry cough, and sometimes he even had difficulties breathing. We were concerned, but had no clue, and nobody had ever mentioned anything about potentially fatal measles complications. After a few weeks, everything was over. Max had recovered, and as spring came around, the vivid, high-energy boy was back. This father was relieved that they had survived a serious bout with measles, but 10 years later, Max began having seizures. At first, the doctors thought it was due to epilepsy that can sometimes happen just before puberty. Many doctors and opinions later, the parents found out that Max had SSPE, subacute sclerosing panencephalitis. It's a late complication of having had measles at an early age, and SSP is always fatal, though the parents fought valiantly at saving their son. 2 years into their fight, Max had a flare-up that put him into a vegetative state. He lived several more years under his parents' care and recently passed away. Many children cannot be vaccinated, either because of age or illness. The baby in the story was only 6 months old, too young to have received his first measles vaccination. In my city, there have been a number of reports of babies with whooping cough who contracted the disease from others who were not vaccinated. Some of those babies died. I now see herd immunity as a personal responsibility to do my part in keeping the children around me healthy, and it's really a responsibility we all have. We should get our booster shots as adults. We should be vaccinated for the flu. We should encourage parents around us to be informed and conscientious about vaccinating their children. When I asked my son recently what he would tell parents who do not vaccinate, he didn't hesitate for a minute. He said, "Allowing perfectly avoidable disease and death to come upon children because of stupid beliefs is like not buckling up your kids with seatbelts because they're not natural. It's dumb, and you should be held personally responsible." He's not a doctor yet, so maybe he will have more tact when actually working with parents.